You were not late when the wait arrived, and you were not forgotten when the road turned rough. What has felt like the heaviest season of your life is being measured by a hand that has not misread a single tear, and today carries the sound of a door moving in the dark. In the quiet of a room where your phone has gone still, where the kettle cools on the counter, where the ceiling seems to watch you more than comfort you, you have been living under a pressure that changed how you breathe. Your shoulders learned the language of waiting, your hands learned to hold back what they wanted to say, and your heart kept asking why the night would not end sooner. Yet even there, a hidden mercy was working, because what crushed you was also revealing what could not carry you anymore. The old story said you were only surviving, but the truer story says you were being prepared to stand when the ground finally gave way. There is a kind of suffering that does not mean you are lost, only that you are being moved out of a place too small for what is being restored. Today begins with that recognition, and it enters softly, like morning light, touching the edge of a chair you almost did not notice. You know the strange exhaustion of opening the same door every day and feeling that the room behind it has become too narrow for your breathing. You have looked at the kitchen sink, the laundry basket, the unread message, the unpaid bill, the same street outside the window, and thought that your life had slowed down until it nearly stopped. But your body has told the truth before your mouth could, because there were moments when your chest tightened for no obvious reason, moments when your eyes filled while nothing around you seemed to explain it. That is how heavy endings often arrive, not with thunder, but with the quiet certainty that something old is refusing to fit. What you called delay may have been a form of guarding, and what you called silence may have been a form of keeping. The burden has not been imaginary, and the tears have not been wasted, yet neither of them has the final word over you. There is a presence that works beneath the visible floorboards of a life, underneath the noise of obligation and the ache of unfinished prayers. You did not imagine the strain, but you also did not imagine the strength being formed under it. Attention, you need to prepare now. I put together an exclusive resource for those who feel set apart for something greater, but live surrounded by noise, distractions, and mental overload. This is a 30-day journey that will transform your life. A guided path to armor your mind and prepare for what's coming with daily practices of focus, boundaries, and discipline. Stop negotiating with the noise. Learn to spot distractions before they control you, and strengthen your mind. Also available in an immersive audio version. Over 10 Zurzazuru readers have already transformed their lives through the 30-day journey. Thousands of people have already started this transformation. People like you who are tired of living in the fog. Ordinary people who decided to stop accepting mental chaos. Take advantage of this limited time offer only this month. Access your link just below in the pinned comment. Today is not asking you to pretend the wait was light. It is asking you to see that it has reached its end. There was a morning, perhaps many mornings, when you sat on the edge of the bed and felt that even getting up would cost more than you had left to give. The blanket was tangled around your legs, the room was still, and the first thought of the day came with the taste of fatigue already in your mouth. You tried to act as if strength would come later, but later kept arriving and finding you already tired. Your mind ran ahead, then circled back, then stopped in the same place, and your heart became familiar with that unfinished movement. The heaviness did not always look dramatic. Sometimes it looked like a sink full of dishes, a child's voice in the next room, a work email you could not answer yet, or a church seat you occupied while feeling far away from everyone. Even then, something in you kept listening, because the soul knows when it is standing near a threshold, This is why the pressure has mattered, even when it felt cruel, because it exposed what depended on appearances and what depended on grace. You were not made to carry endless strain as if it were your name. You were made to cross through it, and the crossing is already beginning. What is being revealed now is that the hardest part of your life was never simply the pain itself, but the way the pain tried to teach you a false definition of yourself. It whispered that you were behind, that you were too drained, too late, too worn to be chosen for anything steady or good. Yet the truth was working in another direction, and every obstacle was also a question. Would you accept the label the suffering tried to place on you, or would you wait for a truer voice? There are seasons in which the old structure of your hope has to crack before a sturdier one can hold you, and that cracking can feel like loss until you understand it as mercy. The door that would not open sooner was not mocking you. It was keeping you from calling a hallway home. The people who misunderstood your silence were not all meant to follow you into the next room. The prayer that seemed unanswered may have been returned to you in a different shape, and the delay that bruised you may have been cutting away what would have collapsed later. You have been through enough to know that not every closed door is rejection. Some are protection, some are preparation, and some are ending exactly when they were meant to end. I know there were days when you could barely tell whether you were grieving the past or fearing the future, because both lived in the same breath. You sat with your cup going cold, your phone face down, your thoughts moving like water around a stone, and you wondered whether the heaviness was simply your life now. But even there, even in that ordinary room, your spirit kept refusing to die quietly. It kept noticing the small things that survived the pressure, like the way light still came through the curtain, like the fact that you still answered one text, still got dressed, still stood up again after sitting too long with your head in your hands. Those are not small victories to heaven. They are evidence that the weight did not own you, even when it visited you every day. The scripture-shaped rhythm of this season is simple and severe. What is meant to crush the faithful often becomes the very ground on which they are made steady. You may not yet feel steady, but the foundation is already changing under your feet. The day that ends a heavy season rarely announces itself with celebration at first. It usually begins with a quiet clarity. You start to see that the burden was real, the lesson was real, and the exit is real too. There is a chair, a table, a hallway, a parked car, a bathroom mirror, or a familiar bus seat where you have done some of your deepest thinking without ever telling anyone. You looked at those places so often that they began to hold your silence like a witness. The weight you carried was not only in your schedule or in your circumstances, but in the way your body learned to expect disappointment before it happened. Your breath shortened when a phone rang. Your stomach tightened before a conversation. Your jaw hardened around words you did not trust would be received. All of that mattered, and none of it was invisible to the one who sees without looking away. What seems like the end of strength is often the point where false strength finally gives up its throne. You were never meant to be held together by constant pressure, and the release that is coming is not a reward for pretending otherwise. It is an act of restoration. The next step is not built from denial, but from the truth that you have already survived what should have broken your voice. That is why today does not come as a fantasy, it comes as a turning. So let your heart stay awake in the middle of this, because the signs of change are not always loud, and they are often easiest to miss when you are expecting fireworks. They appear in the way your chest softens without explanation, in the way a room that once felt suffocating suddenly feels simply ordinary, in the way you stop rehearsing worst-case endings as if they were prophecies. You may still be tired, but you are tired in a different way now, the way someone is tired after carrying a box too long and finally setting it down. The old pressure has not vanished from memory, yet its authority is breaking. That is not imagination. And it is not wishful thinking. It is the slow, firm arrival of relief. What ends today is not your responsibility, not your worth, and not your calling. What ends today is the season that demanded from you what it had no right to demand forever. That is why the air feels different even before the evidence arrives. Something has already shifted, and your life is beginning to agree with it. The floor beneath your feet may still look like the same tiles, the same wood, the same concrete under the same shoes, but the inner ground has changed. You can feel it in the moments when you no longer want to explain yourself to everyone, when the need to defend your existence grows quieter and more distant. You can feel it when you stop picking up every old accusation that tries to follow you into the room. That is what happens when a season has exhausted its right to name you. It no longer sounds convincing, even if it still sounds familiar. There is a difference between familiarity and truth, and your spirit has been learning that difference in the hardest possible classroom. The more you have endured, the more clearly you can now see that not every voice deserves a seat at your table. The season that weighed you down is losing the power to narrate you. That loss may look subtle from the outside, but inside it is seismic. And the first proof of it is this: you are still here, but not in the same way. If you have felt even one of these signs settling over you, write 888 in the comments and come back to me. It is a simple sign of overflow, a quiet confirmation that what was tightening around you is beginning to loosen. Your fingers writing it are not performing for anyone. They are answering the moment that found you. Do not rush past that recognition, because sometimes the smallest agreement becomes the first honest door back into peace. The number is only a sign, but the sign matters because you know what it meant when your chest softened, when your breathing changed, when the room inside you seemed to widen by an inch. That widening is not accidental. It is the beginning of release. So write 888 and then return to this moment with the part of you that has been waiting longest to exhale. What comes next is not the old heaviness repeating itself in a prettier voice. What comes next is the first clean air after a long storm. You may have learned to mistrust good news because too many hopeful moments ended with another burden waiting at the door. That suspicion was understandable, even wise in some seasons, but it does not have to govern you forever. The present hour is not asking you to abandon discernment. It is asking you to recognize when discernment has finished its work and fear has taken over. A closed chapter is not the same thing as a failed promise. A delayed answer is not the same thing as a denied life. The distinction matters because your heart has been trained by hardship to prepare for more hardship, and today that training begins to loosen. In the kitchen, in the car, in the hallway, in the long pause before sleep, you are being invited to notice what no longer matches the old forecast. There is less resistance in you than there was. There is less arguing with hope. There is less collapse at the first sign of uncertainty. These are not dramatic miracles, but they are real ones. A season that has demanded your constant bracing is nearing its final breath. And when a season can no longer hold your name, it starts to lose its grip on your future. The road ahead will not require you to pretend the past was easy, and it will not ask you to erase what shaped you. It will ask you to carry the wisdom without carrying the wound as a home. That is a different weight, and it sits on the soul with more grace than strain. You will notice it in the way you answer a difficult message, in the way you sit down without panicking, in the way you let silence be silence instead of filling it with fear. These are signs of repair. They may look ordinary to others, but to you they will feel like reclaimed breath. The pressure that once seemed endless is beginning to reveal its limit, and that limit is good news. It means the season can be named, bounded, and left behind. You are not required to keep rehearsing a suffering that has already said enough. There is a finality arriving around the old heaviness, and it comes with authority, not noise. It tells you that your life is larger than the season that tried to compress it. When a burden has lasted too long, you begin to think in its shape without realizing it. You plan around it, pray around it, rest around it, and even hope around it. That is why the first change is often internal before it is visible. You stop organizing your whole inner world around what hurts. You start noticing spaces in the day where the pain is no longer the loudest thing in the room. Maybe it is while washing a plate, maybe while stepping into the shower, maybe while sitting in traffic, maybe while watching the evening light move across the wall. In those small places, something in you remembers that you were not made only for endurance. You were made for wholeness, for discernment, for a life that is not always braced against another blow. The ending of the heaviest phase does not erase the memory, but it does change the grammar of the memory. It stops being a prophecy and becomes a testimony. That is why the shift feels both quiet and undeniable. What once defined the atmosphere is no longer in charge of the room. There is a particular kind of tiredness that comes from holding yourself together for everyone else, from keeping the smile in place long after the heart has gone tender and thin. You know that tiredness because it has lived in your face, in your posture, in the way you answered with "I'm fine" when you were anything but fine. Yet even that performance has started to lose its power over you. The need to appear unbroken is giving way to the dignity of being honest before God and before yourself. That honesty is not weakness. It is the exact point where healing begins to move with less resistance. You are no longer as interested in maintaining the illusion that everything can be managed by force. You are learning to let the pressure leave the places it has occupied for too long. This is not instant relief, but it is real relief. And it is already active in you. The same life that once felt overcrowded is opening itself by degrees. A little more room appears, a little more air returns, a little more peace enters without asking permission from the old fear. The signs have been there in the way you look at familiar objects and feel slightly different toward them, as if they belong to a chapter that is closing its cover. The same chair, the same road, the same clock, the same message thread, the same kitchen light have not changed much on their own, but you have. That is why the world can look unchanged while your spirit knows that something decisive is happening. The body notices it first, the shoulders drop, the jaw unclenches, the breath slows, the hands open. Then the soul begins to interpret what the body already understood. This is not the end of you, it is the end of what kept you narrowed. And when the narrowing ends, you begin to realize how much of your life was being squeezed into survival mode. The mercy in this is not small. It is enough to let you stand upright again without trembling at every sound. The heaviest phase is not eternal. It has an exit, and that exit is opening now. Sometimes the most sacred thing in a season like this is not a dramatic answer, but the simple realization that you are no longer fighting the same internal war at full strength. The battle still has echoes, but it doesn't own the battlefield. The tension that once filled every corner of your day is beginning to loosen in the places you least expected. You may notice it when the silence after prayer does not feel empty, or when the future stops looking like a locked gate and starts looking like a road with light on it. That is a sign of return. Not return to the old life, but return to yourself, to steadiness, to the part of you that can hear truth without flinching. The weight that used to sit on your chest is being replaced by something quieter and firmer. It may not feel celebratory yet, but it is holy in its own way. It is the relief of no longer having to pretend the burden was acceptable. It was heavy, it was real, and it is ending. Write "I see it" in the comments, and then come back to me. Say it as a present tense recognition, because that is what this moment is asking you to admit. The image has moved, the pressure has shifted, and the thing that once hid in plain sight is now being named. This is not about proving anything to anyone else. It is about letting the truth settle where your silence has been holding space for too long. When you write those words, you are marking the place where recognition met you and did not pass by. That is important, because the heart needs markers when a season changes. A marked moment becomes easier to remember when the old weight tries to return and claim the room again. So write it, let it stand, and return here with the part of you that knows how to receive. The path forward is clearer than it has been, and it begins with honest sight. You do not need to force joy to prove that relief is real. Relief can be solemn, even tender, before it becomes bright. There are tears that come not because everything is solved, but because the body finally understands it is not under the same siege. There is a deep exhale that feels like surrender, and in this case, surrender is not defeat. It is release from what was never yours to carry forever. You may still be in the same house, the same job, the same neighborhood, the same family table, but the inner temperature is changing. What used to sting without warning now feels a little farther away. What used to dominate your attention now loses its voice more quickly. This is how the ending works before it announces itself publicly. It begins by losing its power privately, and that private loss is often the clearest miracle of all, because only you know how much strength it took to stand through it. There are days when a person can live under pressure so long that peace feels unfamiliar, almost suspicious. That is why this kind of ending requires patience with your own nervous system and kindness toward your own history. You are not failing because your body remembers what your soul is now releasing. You are simply learning a new language after years of speaking survival. The old language said, brace yourself. The new language says, breathe and see. The old language said, expect less. The new language says, receive what has been made room for. That transition may feel awkward at first, like stepping from a dark hallway into sunlight and blinking against the brightness. But the brightness is not an enemy. It is proof that you have crossed into a different hour. What once felt impossible to imagine is now starting to sound normal, and that normal is the beginning of peace. The heaviest phase of your life did not end because you mastered it. It ended because its time is over and its lesson has been complete enough to release you. That matters because you do not need to keep punishing yourself with old interpretations of old pain. You can honor the road without living on it forever. You can remember the night without naming it your address. The weight has taught you discernment, and discernment has taught you where not to return. There is wisdom in that. There is freedom in that. There is a calm strength in knowing that not every burden deserves a permanent room in your spirit. The season that kept you bent is losing its claim, and you are beginning to rise without forcing the rise. The body knows before the mind catches up. The soul knows before the story is rewritten. And when both begin to agree, the ending is already underway. Let your like be your amen without words, if something in this message confirmed what you already knew in your bones. Not as a metric, not as a performance, but as an agreement that the truth here was named correctly. There are moments when a quiet gesture says more than a paragraph of explanation, and this is one of them. The body that has been carrying weight can still say yes in a small, silent way. That yes matters because it tells the heart that it is not mistaken about what it sensed. It tells the spirit that recognition has landed. And when recognition lands, the old confusion loses some of its power to return. So let that simple gesture carry the dignity of a real agreement, and then come back to me. The season ending around you is not asking for spectacle. It is asking for honest witness. There is someone in your life who came into your mind as you read this. Someone quietly tired, someone secretly seeking, someone holding a posture nobody sees, someone working hard while feeling unseen. You do not need to guess why that face appeared in your thoughts, because sometimes love is simply a delivery route for the right message at the right time. Share this with that person, not as a recommendation, but as a delivery, the same way it was delivered to you tonight, by appointment. What is being spoken here may be the exact recognition they have been waiting for in their own silence. And if the thought of them stayed with you while you listened, that is part of the meaning too. The burden ending in one life often becomes a doorway of hope for another. So honor the name that came to mind and let care move outward rather than staying trapped inside your own relief. That movement itself is part of the healing. Before this closes, write "I am chosen" in the comments, not as a wish, not as a hope, as confirmation. Let your fingers do what your spirit is already doing, because the end of the heaviest phase is also the return of identity. You are not writing against the pain, you are writing from beyond it. That difference matters. The old burden tried to reduce you to exhaustion, but this declaration names what exhaustion could not erase. It names belonging, purpose, and the quiet authority of being seen. Once you write it, let it settle. Do not rush it. Do not soften it. Let it stand as a seal over the truth that has been moving through every paragraph of your listening. Then come back to me, because the next breath belongs to the one who finally remembers who they are. Now look back over the path that brought you here, and you can see how each hard place was shaping the next opening. The room that felt too small, the breath that kept shortening, the silent mornings, the unresolved messages, the repeated exhaustion, all of it was part of a season that was nearing its last line. What once felt like endless pressure is now showing its edges, and those edges mean it can be left behind. You are not being asked to romanticize what hurt you. You are being asked to recognize that your life is no longer built to remain there. The light is not asking permission from the dark. It is arriving anyway. The body that learned to brace is learning to trust. The heart that learned to expect delay is learning to receive timing without fear. The soul that kept whispering, "Not this forever," is finally hearing, "Yes, not forever." That is why the ending feels both gentle and strong. It does not tear you loose, it lifts you out. You may still carry memory, but memory is no longer the master of the room. You may still remember what the weight felt like, but remembrance is not the same as return. There is a new order beginning inside you, and it does not depend on pretending the past was lighter than it was. It depends on telling the truth and letting the truth make room. The truth is that you endured more than enough to know the difference between a heavy chapter and a whole life. The truth is that your spirit kept its thread of hope even when your hands were tired. The truth is that what has been ending today was not your destiny, only your confinement. That distinction is sacred, and it changes how you stand. You stand less like someone waiting to be rescued and more like someone who has already been carried through. So receive the blessing that belongs to this hour. You are being released from what kept pressing against your breath. You are being returned to the steadiness that your heart almost forgot, and you are not walking into emptiness, but into cleared space. You are confirmed in the hidden places where no one applauded your endurance. Attention, you need to prepare now. I put together an exclusive resource for those who feel set apart for something greater, but live surrounded by noise, distractions, and mental overload. This is a 30-day journey that will transform your life. A guided path to armor your mind and prepare for what's coming with daily practices of focus, boundaries, and discipline. Stop negotiating with the noise. Learn to spot distractions before they control you. And strengthen your mind. Also available in an immersive audio version. Over 10 Zuru readers have already transformed their lives through the 30-day journey. Thousands of people have already started this transformation. People like you who are tired of living in the fog. Ordinary people who decided to stop accepting mental chaos. Take advantage of this limited time offer only this month. Access your link just below in the pinned comment.